Hello, everybody, and welcome to the next episode of Music Meltdown. In this episode, we're going to be talking about 60s pop vocal group, the Mamas and the Papas. Not really that well regarded except for a couple of tracks, but those tracks are quite honestly among the best of the entire decade. Well known for stuff like My Girl, Let's Go Dedicated to the One I Love, and many others.
California Dreamin.
I guess I forgot the biggest one. That's fine. With that being said, four of them, they have 5 records by legal obligation. With that being said, knowledge going into this. Aiden?
I had heard, I think, all of these except People Like Us all the way through, and I think I'd heard a couple of the tracks off that one, but I only once. I think in terms of repeat listenings, I just kind of gravitate more towards like the singles and stuff like that.
I mean, they're an iconic California band, and like they're where I live, so it's like if you listen to like and I listen to oldies radio a lot growing up, so like basically all of their singles were played all the time. So as far as singles go, I know them very well, but I've heard none of these albums in full before.
Were you California dreaming all night long?
You know it.
I'm in a similar spot to Steph, except I was going to listen to their greatest hits record whenever Taste Like Music was covering them at the beginning of January. I didn't finish the full record, but I heard Dedicated to the One That I Love, and I basically made a statement there that I was going to listen to the whole discography because I thought that song was tremendous. I only just now got around to it within the past 2 weeks, though, so my schedule's a little tight for listening.
I can start if neither of you want to.
Go ahead.
Okay, so my number 5 is their final album, People Like Us. And honestly, this is just like very mid to me. Like that's the word that was defined for this album. It just, they don't really feel like they want to be there at all. I just don't, there's like very little energy, I think, across the whole album. I think sometimes the mellow vibe works. I think the Step Out, which was the single, is kind of good. I kind of like that one. And, you know, the mellow vibe isn't totally terrible, but it's just like, it's a weird mishmash. It doesn't feel like a Mamas and the Papas album really at all. It's kind of missing most of their trademark elements. It's not like bad, but I don't think I'll ever listen to it again. So, but it's, you know, yeah, it's not like offensive to me. So I'll give it a 3 out of 5.
Yeah, that's my least favorite also. I didn't really like this album at all. People Like Us, I gave it 2.5 out of 5. It was very dull, boring, no energy whatsoever. None of the songs are very memorable. None of them sound, I mean, it was like an obligation to avoid a lawsuit, which is why they recorded it. So it's just like a rush job, hastily put together, without much concern for its like quality, and it shows. It's just like when I go to the Planned Parenthood clinic, this is like the type of music they play in the waiting room. Like the entire time it felt like I was like waiting for like a doctor's appointment, and that's not a good thing when I'm listening to an album. So yeah, not much to say about this at all. It's only like 40 minutes, but it felt like 2 hours when I was hearing it. So I give it 2.5 out of 5. I'm not listening.
Yeah, I mean,
it's like off-brand music, I feel like that's the way I would describe it.
Yeah, I was just saying that it's mid, but I think you're being a little harsher on the record than you need to be. I mean, I agree it's the bottom. It's 2.5 stars. It's okay. But there's not a lot to it. Most of it's just sort of all right. And there isn't really much passion here. However, I think this is one of their better sounding albums overall. And none of their records sound bad, but I think of this one, just mainly being into the 70s and having things evolved past where their previous records were, I just think that it sounds really nice and it's a really pleasant experience, which I really treasure in my music listening. I just want things to really be nice and gentle and just sort of like calm to listen to. It's going to sound weird whenever we do something like Pixies, and I'm going to give like 5 stars to Surfer Rosa, but past that, I think that there are some absolute standouts here. I think at the title track, No Dough and Grasshopper are all very good songs, but as I was saying before, the rest of the material, it's just all right and makes those ones really stand out. It's 2.5 stars, like I said before. It's not a bad record, but I might reach for it if I just need something sort of nice, sort of gentle to throw on in the background, which who knows? It seems like an album that I would like to listen to at like work or something, just to sort of get me through the day and just sort of have those nice melodies in the background.
Yeah, I mean, well, you said I was harsh on it, but I gave it a higher score than you, so I think maybe you're harshing on it more.
Yeah,
This
I pointed out 3 tracks that I really liked though.
that's fair enough. Yeah, I'll move on. My number 4 is going to be the album they did just before this, the Papas and the Mamas. I think this one is like it's them collapsing as a band. Like there's very little cohesion across the album, and it's like it still has good material. I really like Safe in My Garden. I think 12:30 is a good song, and I think the standout's probably Dream a Little Dream of Me. But it feels like they're kind of running on fumes at this point, and there isn't as much here that pulls me towards it as on their previous 3 albums, which I think had more kind of inspiration and more drive to their sound. This one kind of just really does feel like they're kind of running out of material and almost scraping the bottom of the barrel. So yeah. And I'm going to give this one a 3.5 stars. You know, it's still a good listen. It still has good song on it, but in terms of it doesn't have that same like level of inspiration some of their other stuff does.
Yeah, that's also my number 4 is Mamas and Papas, or the Papas and the Mamas, or whatever it's called. Um, I give it 3 out of 5.
That would have been a big
Again,
mistake there.
sorry. I mean, I just like the singles better with this band. I mean, with none of these albums really like blew me away, to be honest. The singles are like really memorable, but like the album tracks just kind of very hit and miss. On this album, it's way too long for one thing, um, and a lot of the songs are really forgettable. And it's like this band is at its best when it's like fun and up tempo, and this album is kind of a downer. It just I don't know, it feels very downbeat compared to what I'm used to hearing from them, and it just didn't work for me at all. Um, I liked For the Love of Ivy. That was a kind of nice song, nice arrangement. And like the performing and everything is really nice and it's well done. You know, this they have great voices, everyone in the group, and you have like some of the best musicians all time doing the session work on it. But I don't know. Again, this album didn't really grab me. It's a bit. Uh, I hate to say it, but you know, a lot of times, a lot of their music kind of veers towards background music for me, which isn't a bad thing, but it's just not a compelling like listen for me at all. But this is a decent album. It wasn't terrible, but it didn't really do anything for me really. So number 4, Papas and the Mamas, 3 stars.
I think that we actually look into this band for slightly different things because while I think that their up tempo and their nicer stuff is all right, I kind of prefer it whenever they're more stripped back and it's going more off the vocal melodies and sort of the emotional aspects of their songwriting. But I'm surprised that you don't have that one at least 1 spot higher because I think pretty clearly the next worst record is Deliver. Um, it's a bit of a disappointment, especially coming off of the first 2 records, because those 2 records are just really great, in my opinion. But it starts out as great as those other ones, dedicated to the one I love, like I mentioned earlier. That's the reason I wanted to look into this band, and it's just an absolutely tremendous track. My Girl is just as good as that, and I find Creek Alley is also incredibly good. But from then on out, I like Sing for Your Supper. I think that Twist and Shout is a really bad cover song. I don't like that version at all, especially knowing that the Beatles one exists already, which is pretty clearly the definitive version of the song, I would argue. Like, why even bother going to this one? Of course, you're not going to say that. Okay. None of the other songs are bad per se, but they aren't great. They're all just kind of decent past there. It's the highlights on the record with how good they are is enough to give it to 3 stars. It's a pretty decent record, but after like the first 5 tracks or so, I would probably just turn it off from there and go straight to the Papas and the Mamas.
Yeah, that's I kind of agree with you about that album. It's like, not super great. But that's not my next one. My next one is going to be their self-titled. I think this one is my favorite song by them, which is I Saw Her Again. I just think that's an amazing song. But I just think overall it just feels like they're doing their debut again, but it's not as fresh. There's not as much kind of energy behind it, I don't think. I like their version of Dancing in the Street a lot, I have to say as well. I like the way Cass Elliot sings that one. And I also really like Words of Love. But yeah, it's okay, but it does feel like kind of a rehash. I feel like these ideas were better done on their debut, but it's still not a bad listen by any stretch of the imagination. And I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. Just partially on the basis that it has my favorite song by them, and partially because I still think there's strong material here.
All right. My number 3 is Deliver, and I'm giving it a light 4 out of 5. It's very more again, I don't think it's a great album, but the highlights are a bit stronger than on the last 2 albums they did. But yeah, it's got some very memorable songs, mainly the singles. Dedicated to the One I Love is also one of my favorite tracks. Maybe out of their covers, it's definitely my top favorite track by them. Because when I was in when I graduated high school, I worked at a Halloween store in a mall, or it was in the same shopping center as a mall. And like every morning, like before, I'd have some time to kill before work, so I'd like walk through the mall, and there'd be nobody in there, and I'd drink coffee, and like Dedicated the One I Love was one that would play, and like just the sound of the voices echoing with all that reverb in that big empty space, or whatever. It sounded really, really amazing. I think that was like the song that kind of made me interested in them. But that's definitely my favorite song on the album. And I don't know, it's just a really, really excellently performed song. It's just fantastic. And I like the singles on it too. Um, Overall, it sounds really nice. It's a good listen. I'm also not crazy about the Twist and Shout cover, but then again, I like the Isley Brothers original better than the Beatles version. I just think they sing it better. Um, I don't know. See, the problem I have with most of their covers is that it just comes across so gimmicky. Like it's cool that they're like taking a simple song and like making them into like grand orchestrated things and making the chord changes more complicated. But I don't know. It comes across. It's cool if they did it once or twice. They do it so much that it just comes across as extremely gimmicky to me. And I like that they do like old tiny like 1930s songs or whatever. But again, it gets a bit old after a while, And but it's as a whole, it's a listenable album. Maybe I'll revisit this one someday, but I didn't mind this one too much. Light 4 out of 5.
That just kind of goes to show the difference in our scales right there. Because for me, a 4 star record is very good to great, and that's why so little records end up getting that 4 or above in comparison to everything else I listen to. With that being said, though, my number 3 is going to be the Papas and the Mamas, and this one is a bit of a mixed bag, but compared to Deliver, it's a pretty blatant step forward for me. Safe in My Garden and Meditation Mama both kick off the record very strongly. For the Love of Ivy is also good, but gets overshadowed by the absolute excellent tracks being Dream a Little Dream of Me and Mansions. The first half of Gemini Child isn't great, but past that, it's a decent enough song. Saying nothing Nothing Too Good for My Little Girl was pretty good. Same with Too Late, but the last few tracks aren't really too special for me. And it feels like this whole record, it seems like they're trying to evolve their sound into something that would have ended up being great upon another record. And I feel like that's sort of where you guys were getting a disconnect because you, moreover, just kind of want that earlier sound that they were going for. But I feel like they're really going for something that could have been super interesting, especially with the warm, sort of great sounding production of the mid to early 70s. I feel like it really could have shown off their highlights and really goes to show the best parts of people like this. However, they just sort of called it quits too early, in my opinion, and never really got to show that promise that these records ended up showing. Overall, though, with a little bit of fine tuning, this record could have been really great. It is a little long for their sound, and I probably could have trimmed a couple of cuts to get it down to a half hour. I'm still going to go ahead and give it a 3.5 because I do think that it is a good album, but it just doesn't reach the peaks of the first two albums for me. And I feel like it was a really transitionary record to a transition that they just never amounted to.
Yeah, I agree with what you said about how it's like a transition that never led to anything else. But my number two is going to be Deliver. I think it's it's kind of like a bit of a step up from their self-titled. I think it has a lot of nice, really strong material on it, like Creek Alley and Dedicated to the One I Love. Yeah, I don't love their cover of Twist and Shout, but it's pretty good. I prefer either the original by the Top Notes or the Isley Brothers version, I'd probably say. But it's still good. But yeah, overall, I'm glad I listened to it. I probably will again, but it's not like S tier. It's not like an S tier product, so I'll give this one a 4 out of 5 as well.
I just want to interject right here because none of us brought it up, and I figure one of you two may have. There's some really awkward production on that record, at least the version that I heard on some of the tracks, where it's like the right channel is solely the isolated vocals, and the left side is just
Yeah,
like
it's like
a little
weird
bit of the
panning.
track. It doesn't even feel kind of like how much I dislike the Beatles stuff that does that similar thing. It feels just sort of it feels more awkward than anything than bad. It didn't kill a lot of the tracks, but whenever it shows up, it's just like it makes you think there's something wrong with like your headset or something.
Yeah, well, I listen to everything in mono, but for that one, because I kind of heard it had wonky production, um I like turned off the mono, and yeah, it was pretty weird. But that's one case where I'm glad I just have mono mixed down as standard on my phone, because it was like good there.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea. Yeah, I agree. I noticed that too. It's just the vocals sound really weird in the mix on some of these albums. I don't know why. I don't know if it's a remastering error or if it's something's wrong with the tapes or something like that, but it is a bit distracting sometimes. But my number two is self-titled. Again, light 4, fine, sounds good. Has my favorite Mamas and Papas song on it. I saw her again last night. Great song. I love songs with easily their best original song for me. Because I love songs that are upbeat but have really depressing lyrics at the same time. And that one's just a classic in that regard. I love that part where I think Mama Cass comes in early or whatever for the rest of the group. It's very clever. I like that they left that in. But again, it didn't really jump out and grab me, but like when I give these albums like 4 or whatever, it's on the strength of how good the production and the performances qualities are. They are very well produced and they are very well performed. But one problem I think that holds this band back for me is that they're so tied with like the mid 60s like main trends or whatever that it does kind of make a lot of their stuff extremely dated compared to like other bands from that time period. Like they have songs like that are literally called Something Groovy and Meditation Mama. So, this is very much a band of its time. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's just, but it's a good album, sounds nice, has some highlights. The singles are very good as usual. They're very good singers, and a lot of these albums, I just don't really have much to say about them. They didn't really give me a whole lot to work with here. So I give it 4 out of 5. My second favorite Thomas and Papa's album.
Yeah, to just sort of interject there, I have no issues with their sound being a little bit dated or anything. Even me, somebody who isn't typically the biggest fan of 60s pop, I feel like they're able to utilize the trends of the time and sort of work them into a really great material and sort of make this sort of wonderful art. And I wouldn't even necessarily go out of my way to say it's too prolific or even too great of anything, but I just think that it's so nice to listen to. It's just I could listen to their first 2 records at any time because I just think that they are I think that they're great. I think that they're incredibly well put together pop records for the time period. And it does the thing that I really like the most about 60s pop is it doesn't take itself too seriously. And it doesn't try and grow into anything that it isn't, which I think is a big issue with me in a lot of 60s pop and why it doesn't connect because it kind of tries to go for this big sort of new movement in music. And oftentimes I think that kind of stretches past where it should be and kind of loses a bit of what I would personally get the most enjoyment from. With that being said, I'm sorry to disappoint, but my number 2 is If You Can Believe Your Eyes and Ears. I was very excited going into this because, as I said before, I adore Dedicated to the One I Love, and this is their first record that I listened to, and it was just excellent. I love how their vocals play with one another, and musically, it's just absolutely gorgeous. Monday Monday is one of the best openers of the decade, in my opinion. The heavy use of their vocals interplaying with one another mixed with the gorgeous orchestral elements is just really great. The following songs aren't much weaker with stuff like Straight Shooter, I Call Your Name, Go Where You Want to Go, and California Dreamin' especially. I don't have a ton to say about it because I think it's just a consistently very great album with an amazing sound and just fantastic vocal work. It's not going to reach into like my upper echelon of music because it doesn't have that sort of wow factor to really blow me away, but I'm going a pretty solid 4 stars for me, like an 8.5 out of 10.
If you've been, yeah, keeping up with all the ones I listed 5 through 2, my number 1 is the debut album, If You Can Believe Your Eyes and Ears. Yeah, I just think this is the best kind of encapsulation of their sound you're going to get. And it's kind of like part of the problem for me is I don't think I agree with you, Adrian, about like the growth. Like for me, I really like being able to map an artist's growth over their releases and see like it and see how they change. And like I think this one they promise that they're going to be this very like dynamic 60s band, but I don't necessarily think any of their following records really fully live up to that. They kind of just redo this one to better and worse degrees, but I don't think they ever really push the envelope or set the zeitgeist. They kind of just follow it. But I think this is just a great album. California Dreaming and Monday Monday and Go Where You Want to Go are all just classic singles off of it. It's just a great version of their sound. If there's one song I'm not too crazy on, I don't really like the way you want to dance. I think a song like that has a simple melody that kind of needs a ton of like power in the arrangement, or else it just kind of sounds boring. Which I think the Beach Boys and the Ramones both understood pretty well, and I don't think they kind of get that. So it just kind of plods along, but everything else on it is stellar. The in crowd's really good as well. I don't know whether or not I like their version of You Baby more or less than the Turtles version, but both are pretty good. But otherwise, yeah, I don't have anything to complain about really. It's not going to get a 5-star. I don't think it's enough of a clear statement to warrant one. But it's a 4.5. So 4.5 out of 5, my number 1 debut.
Yeah, the debut is also my number one. Again, um, like 4 out of 5. That's about as high as I go for the studio albums. But they do have a 5-star album for me, but it's a compilation. Um, I heard this really great compilation from 1971. I think it was done to celebrate the breaking up of the group, but it's called The Gathering of Flowers. And it's a double album, and I really enjoy every moment of that more than any of their actual studio albums. It has all their best songs compiled in one thing, and it has like an interesting format where you hear like bits of it's almost like an audio commentary thing where you have like bits of like interview excerpts from like the members talking about certain tracks or their story in between the songs. It's very interesting. It's the first time I've heard that. But the studio albums just don't do it for me. Sorry. I love this group and I think they're really great, but it's just I don't know. I will say the debut has the greatest number of songs that I like on it, is why it's my favorite. But the covers are kind of hit or miss. I also Do You Want to Dance doesn't really work as a ballad, I think. It just drags. Um Most of the covers on here are like the originals better. Um they sing really good. Production sounds great. It's a pleasant listen. Some fine moments. Monday is probably the standout for me. I do like the version of the Beatles song "I Call Your Name." That's pretty cool. Um, it's a good album. 4 out of 5.
Of how half your review wasn't even talking about the album.
Not a whole lot to say about it.
I don't know. There's not a lot to say about this band as a whole, though. They're just an incredibly well put together 60s pop group with some really great sounding albums and some really killer singles. But even then, I think the deep cuts on their first two records are very good, especially on my number one, The Mamas and the Papas. And in my opinion, this is very similar to other records in the sense that it's just a very notable step up from the debut to me. All of the songs are generally on a similar level of quality and consistency. It's just on this record, I feel like they take a few more risks within the sound and more finely tune up the way that the vocals work together, which is the main thing to their sound as a whole. I think the best that you can hear their vocals is going to be the best experience you can have with the band itself. Trip, Stumble, and Fall is excellent. I love the psychedelic cut of Dancing Bear. Words of Love is great. Their cover of Dancing in the Street, in my personal opinion, is a definitive version of the song. I think it's just absolutely tremendous. At the very least, it destroys the Van Halen version of it, which is not good. um, and all from there, all the other tracks are just incredibly enjoyable and pleasant to throw on at any time. Like with the debut, it's another solid 4, but I just like this one slightly more as an album. And like you're saying, an album really isn't the best vessel for this band. And it's not going to be this sort of mind melting or just mind boggling experience whenever you listen to it. It's just going to be a fun, joyful 60s pop foray or something like that. I personally like them a lot, but I wouldn't blame anybody for thinking that they're just sort of a byproduct of the time because that's really what they are. 4 stars for the Mamas and the Papas.
Yeah, I think like one thing they suffer from is I don't think they have like a real vision for their music. I don't think like I think they have like a pleasant sound and good songs, but I don't think there's like either one member or multiple members that has like this like grand vision for where the band should go. And that's something I really like in artists where they kind of aren't afraid to try and like go all out and maybe get a little pretentious, get a little out there. Like I'm cool with that. At least you're taking risks. I don't think they take enough risks, but the music on its own is good enough to get them very, high ratings, I'd say, for me overall.
They needed like a George Martin or a Nigel Godrich or something, like a Todd Rundgren even. That's sort of producer that would just sort of put them up a step and just sort of have them evolve their sound and write better material overall. I really do
Yeah.
think if they would have gone on into the 70s, they really could have been just a great band because they were evolving. It's just they broke up for whatever reason. I didn't even look that up. Does anybody know?
They were
they-
dating each other.
That
and
makes
they
sense.
stopped
constant personal that isn't, we didn't even mention all the drama around their second album where they
yeah.
replaced Michelle Phillips with Jill Gibson, and then they brought her back like a month before the album came out, and they like
Who-
reshot the album cover like 4 times or some shit. Yeah.
Who needs Michelle? They made their best album without her.
Who would you say is your favorite singer? Because my favorite is actually Michelle of the Mamas and the Papas.
I'm gonna be honest, I didn't care even slightly enough to make an effort. All I know is they use John Phillips way too much as the lead singer. Mama Cass should sing way more lead than she does.
Yeah,
It's absurd how little they
all
let
have
the
great
female
voices.
singers.
They all have great voices. Honestly, I just like the blend. The blend they have when they sing together is the best part of that band.
Yeah.
Very well arranged vocal music, and it's interesting too because like the harmonies and everything aren't even like rock and roll. Really, it's like more closer to like 40s and 50s like jazz group singing.
Yeah.
It's just done in like a
its own
60s
thing.
pop way. Yeah.
Well, I think that we kind of milked the Mamas and the Papas for all they're worth. No other big things to note or no other elephants in the room to discuss with this group. That being said, though, we're going to move into our next artist. 3 albums of the sort of folky legend who was forgotten in his time and unfortunately passed way too soon, Nick Drake.
I haven't started listening, so
I tried.
when I listen, I will comment. But for now, I'll just say, his name kind of sounds cool, so I think the music might vibe. I don't know. We'll see.
I tried to listen to Pink Moon a while ago. I just wasn't clicking with it.
Yeah,
Great.
I think I've heard like
we
2
know.
songs, maybe. I don't know, but I'll see.
Alrighty. Yeah, I think that we addressed everything as said before. Nick Drake next week. Steph's leaving us. What the hell? Bye, everyone.